They thought they could corner him with accusations. Instead, he ripped off his mic and walked. The studio lights burned bright, reflecting off the sleek black floor. Cameras stood poised like silent sentinels, their lenses waiting to capture every flicker of expression. Across a glass table, Elon Musk and Greg Talbot sat facing each other, both seemingly at ease, yet the air between them carried an unspoken tension. Greg, a seasoned TV host known for his sharp questioning and left-leaning stance, had played this game 1,000 times before. His crisp gray suit, neatly folded hands, and carefully measured smile exuded warmth but not sincerity. Elon, in contrast, leaned back slightly, one ankle resting on his knee, his expression unreadable. He had done hundreds of interviews, but something about this one felt different. His gut told him Greg wasn't just here to ask about Tesla, SpaceX, or his latest acquisition. There was something else, lurking beneath the polite formalities. The show's theme music faded, replaced by the steady voice of an off-screen announcer. Tonight, billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk sits down with Greg Talbot in an exclusive conversation. No topic is off-limits. Stay tuned for a discussion you won't forget. The red recording light blinked to life. Greg adjusted his tie and turned toward the camera. Welcome back to the Talbot Report. Tonight, we have a guest who hardly needs an introduction. He's redefined the auto industry, launched rockets into space, and is currently at the center of more controversies than we can count. Elon Musk, thanks for being here. Elon gave a small nod. Thanks for having me. His voice was even, his posture relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, scanning Greg like an equation, looking for the variables that didn't add up. Greg wasted no time. Let's start with something light. A rehearsed chuckle. Twitter, or should I say X? A lot of people believe the platform has changed dramatically under your leadership. Some say for the better, others, not so much. Elon smirked slightly. Depends who you ask. If you ask people who value free speech, they'll say it's improved. If you ask people who liked censorship, they'll say it's worse. Greg raised an eyebrow. Censorship? That's a strong word. It's the right word, Elon countered. Greg let the moment hang before shifting in his seat. All right, but surely you'd agree that free speech doesn't mean allowing hate to spread unchecked? Elon exhaled through his nose. He already saw where this was going. What you call hate speech, someone else might call a strong opinion. The point is, who gets to decide? A bunch of unelected fact-checkers? Greg smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. So, no regrets on how you've handled things? Not really, Elon said casually. Mistakes? Sure, but regret? No. Twitter was dying when I bought it. Now, people actually use it. Greg nodded slowly. Interesting, but let's move on. The conversation flowed. Tesla's latest innovations, Neuralink's ambitions, Musk's stance on AI regulation. But something in Greg's tone had shifted. The questions felt calculated. Not unusual for an interview like this, but there was an edge creeping in, something just beneath the surface. Then, a subtle change. Greg leaned forward slightly, lacing his fingers together. His next words carried a different weight. You've built an empire, Elon, no doubt about that. But with great power comes great scrutiny. Elon blinked, unimpressed. That's usually how it works. Greg tilted his head. Then let's address some of that scrutiny, shall we? Musk had a feeling. This was where the real interview was about to begin. Greg maintained his polished smile, but his eyes had sharpened. The warm pleasantries were over. He tapped a few notes on his tablet before looking up. Elon, you've always had a reputation for pushing boundaries. People admire that. But some say you push them a little too far. Elon didn't flinch. Progress requires risk. Greg nodded as if he agreed. Of course, but let's talk about accountability. He turned to the camera for effect. Your leadership style has been described as brilliant, but reckless. Employees from Tesla and SpaceX have spoken about unrealistic deadlines, brutal work hours, and a culture of fear. He turned back to Musk. Are they lying? Elon let out a quiet breath. I expect high performance. This isn't a coffee shop. We're building rockets and AI, not flipping burgers. I don't force anyone to work for me. They choose to because they believe in what we're doing. Greg's eyebrows lifted slightly. That's a fair point. But what about the reports of people being fired over minor disagreements? The tension in the room thickened. The real battle had begun. Engineers claim they questioned your decisions, only to find themselves out the door the next day. Elon shrugged. If someone isn't aligned with the mission, they shouldn't be there. No one's entitled to a job just because they've been around for a while. Greg pursed his lips as if carefully considering his next move, then leaned forward. All right, let's talk about your stance on AI. Elon's expression remained steady, but he noted the shift in topic. You've repeatedly warned about the dangers of artificial intelligence, Greg continued. You've even called it an existential threat. And yet you're actively developing AI through XAI, Neuralink, and Tesla's self-driving technology. Isn't that a contradiction? Elon gave a half smile. If you're afraid of a flood, do you just hope it never rains, or do you start building better dams? Greg let the analogy settle before pressing on. So you believe controlling AI is the only way to protect humanity? I believe that if the wrong people control it, we're in trouble. Greg's lips twitched as if he'd been waiting for that answer. The wrong people, who are they? Elon's gaze was unwavering. Governments that prioritize control over innovation, tech companies that put profit above ethics, media outlets that manipulate narratives instead of informing the public. Greg chuckled, shaking his head. So everyone but you? Elon's expression remained unchanged, though his fingers drummed lightly against the armrest. Greg's smile widened. See, that's what people find interesting about you. You position yourself as a renegade, an anti-establishment genius here to save the world from bad actors. But at the same time, you're one of the most powerful people on the planet. Some would say that makes you the very thing you claim to fight against. Elon exhaled through his nose. Power isn't the problem. It's who wields it and for what purpose. Greg nodded, seemingly satisfied with the response. But then, his expression shifted, his next words slower, more deliberate. Let's talk about your connections. A flicker of something crossed Elon's face. Greg pressed on. You've been seen at private events with world leaders, controversial billionaires, government officials, some of whom aren't exactly known for their commitment to human rights. And yet you speak about free speech and transparency. Tilted his head slightly. Why should people trust that you're not playing both sides? Elon leaned forward, his voice calm but sharp. Meeting someone doesn't mean agreeing with them. I'll talk to anyone if it leads to progress. Greg wasn't done. Sure, but there's a difference between talking and working together. Documents have surfaced linking you to private deals with certain governments. Elon's expression remained still, but the tension in the room shifted. Greg let the silence linger just a beat too long before delivering his next line. Some say you're not the rebel you pretend to be, that you're just another billionaire, protecting his own interests. Elon inhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around the armrest. Greg saw it. The subtle signs, the barely perceptible shifts in body language. He leaned in slightly, his voice lowering, sharpening the silence in the room. Elon, you've built a reputation on transparency, on speaking your mind, on being, he lifted his fingers into air quotes, the last honest billionaire. But what if I told you that some of your honesty has been carefully curated? Elon's eyebrow twitched. Sounds like you've got a point to make, so make it. Greg took his time. He tapped his tablet as if reading from a source, though his eyes never left Elon's. Recently, whispers have emerged, documents surfacing, people talking off the record. They claim that while you publicly condemn government overreach, behind closed doors you've made quiet deals, gaining special treatment for your companies, favorable contracts, tax breaks, access to technologies most companies could only dream of. He let the accusation hang in the air. Elon exhaled, slow, controlled. You think Tesla, SpaceX, and my other companies grew without competition? Without scrutiny? We've had to fight for every inch of progress. If there were backroom deals, I must have missed the memo. Greg nodded, as if expecting that response. All right then, Let's be specific. Let's talk about China. The air in the studio thickened. Tesla is the only foreign-owned automaker allowed to operate in China without a domestic partner, Greg said, his tone precise, calculated. That's not just luck. That's an exception the Chinese government made for you. In exchange, Tesla's gigafactory in Shanghai has helped China. Engineers who questioned your decisions were reportedly shown the door the next day. Elon shrugged. If someone isn't aligned with the mission, they shouldn't be here. No one's entitled to a job just because they've been around for a while. Greg pursed his lips as if weighing his next move, then leaned forward. All right, let's talk about your stance on AI. Elon's expression remained steady, but the shift in topic wasn't lost on him. You've repeatedly warned about the dangers of artificial intelligence, Greg continued. You've even called it an existential threat. And yet you're actively developing AI through XAI, Neuralink, and Tesla's self-driving technology. Isn't that a contradiction? Elon gave a half smile. If you're afraid of a flood, do you just hope it never rains? Or do you start building better dams? Greg let the analogy settle before pressing on. So you believe controlling AI is the only way to protect humanity from it? I believe that if the wrong people control it, we're in trouble. Greg's lips twitched slightly, as if he had been waiting for that answer. And who are the wrong people? Elon's gaze remained firm. Governments that prioritize control over innovation. Tech companies that put profit above ethics. Media outlets that manipulate narratives instead of informing the public. Greg chuckled, shaking his head. So, everyone but you? Elon didn't flinch, but his fingers drummed lightly against the armrest. Greg's smile grew. See, that's what people find interesting about you. You position yourself as this renegade, this anti-establishment genius out to save the world from bad actors. But at the same time, you're one of the most powerful people on the planet. Some would say that makes you the very thing you claim to be fighting against. Elon exhaled through his nose. Power isn't the problem, it's who wields it and for what purpose. Greg nodded as if accepting the answer, but then his smile faded. His next question was slower, more deliberate. Let's talk about your connections. A flicker of something passed through Elon's expression. You've been seen at private events with world leaders, controversial billionaires, and government officials from multiple countries, some not exactly known for their human rights records, and yet you speak about free speech and transparency. Greg tilted his head. Why should people trust that you're not playing both sides? Elon leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but sharp. Meeting someone doesn't mean agreeing with them. I'll talk to anyone if it leads to progress. Greg pressed further. Sure, but there's a difference between talking and working together. Documents have surfaced linking you to private deals with certain governments. Elon's face remained still, but something in the air shifted. Greg let the silence hang for just a beat too long before delivering the next line. Some say you're not the rebel you claim to be, that you're just another billionaire protecting his own interests. Elon inhaled through his nose, fingers tightening around the armrest. Greg wasn't done. Let's get specific. Let's talk about China. The air in the studio thickened. Tesla is the only foreign-owned automaker allowed to operate in China without a domestic partner, Greg said, his tone precise. That's not just luck. That's an exception the Chinese government made for you. In exchange, Tesla's gigafactory in Shanghai has helped advance China's EV industry, an industry now competing directly with American automakers. Greg's brows lifted slightly. That sounds an awful lot like a deal. Elon's expression darkened, his lips pressing into a firm line. We build cars there. That's it. No special favors, no hidden agreements. Every major company that wants to sell in China has to manufacture there. Why should Tesla be any different? Greg didn't break eye contact. Because unlike the others, you didn't have to give up a stake in your company. And now, the same. Chinese firms Tesla helped build are undercutting American automakers on pricing and supply chains. Some even suggest you helped accelerate China's dominance in EVs, at America's expense. Elon let out a short breath, somewhere between amusement and irritation. Are you suggesting I committed treason? Greg hesitated. That pause, that moment of silence. Elon noticed. Leaning forward, his voice carried a sharper edge. I build things. That's what I do. While politicians argue about trade wars, I solve problems. If people want to twist that into something sinister, that's on them. Greg let the words settle before responding. People just want to know where your loyalty lies. Elon scoffed, shaking his head. My loyalty? My loyalty is to humanity's future, not to a single government, not to a political party, and certainly not to whatever media narrative is trending this week. You're just throwing out wild accusations, Elon said, his patience visibly thinning. Greg held up his hands. I'm just asking questions. Elon shook his head, chuckling under his breath. No, you're performing, and frankly, it's pathetic. Greg pressed forward, unfazed by the insult. Elon, if you have nothing to hide, why are you so defensive? That was it. The final straw. Elon's expression hardened, his jaw clenched as he reached for the mic clipped to his jacket. With one swift motion, he yanked it off and tossed it onto the table. The small thud echoed louder than it should have in the dead silence of the studio. This isn't an interview, he said, his voice low but charged. It's a setup. Greg opened his mouth to respond, but Elon was already standing. He smoothed down his blazer, casting one last glance at the host before turning on his heel. The camera crew froze. A producer whispered frantically into a headset. A stagehand took a hesitant step forward as if debating whether to intervene, but thought better of it. Elon was already walking off set. Greg turned back to the camera, his face carefully controlled. But there was a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. Well, he said, exhaling dramatically. That was unexpected. The red recording light was still on. Millions of viewers had just witnessed a moment that would dominate headlines for weeks, and the real storm was only beginning. The moment Elon walked off set, chaos erupted behind the scenes. Producers scrambled, whispering into headsets, debating whether to cut to commercial or let the cameras roll. The studio crew, usually invisible, stood frozen, unsure whether to step in or simply watch history unfold. Greg Talbot, however, didn't miss a beat. With practiced ease, he turned back to the camera, smoothing his tie as if nothing out of the ordinary had just happened. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his tone measured. It seems Mr. Musk has left the conversation, but let's be honest, walking away from tough questions doesn't make them disappear. He knew exactly what he was doing. The production team seized the moment. Within minutes, a split-screen replay showed Musk unclipping his mic, standing up, and storming off. They slowed it down, zoomed in on his expression, analyzing every frame, capturing every flicker of frustration. Then came the headlines. Elon Musk storms off live TV after explosive confrontation. Musk loses his cool when pressed about secret government deals. Is this the moment Musk's empire begins to crack? Social media erupted. Twitter, or X as Musk insisted it be called, became a battleground. His supporters rallied behind him. That wasn't an interview. It was an ambush. Greg Talbot is a snake. Musk didn't storm off, he refused to play their game. Funny how they frame it as losing control when someone refuses to sit through a smear job. But the other side was just as loud. Musk ran because he got caught. If you have nothing to hide, you don't walk away. This is what happens when billionaires think they're above accountability. Late-night talk shows jumped on the moment. Clips of Musk's exit played, on loop, each host putting their own spin on it. Some mocked him, some praised him. But one thing was clear. Nobody was ignoring it. Even mainstream news anchors, usually careful with their words, couldn't resist the spectacle. This is a defining moment for Elon Musk, one commentator said. For years, he's positioned himself as a fearless innovator, unafraid of tough conversations. But tonight, when faced with real accountability, he walked away. Others pushed back. Let's be honest. Greg Talbot knew exactly what he was doing. That wasn't journalism. That was a setup. Musk didn't run, he refused to entertain bad faith arguments. And yet, amidst the firestorm, Musk himself remained silent. No tweets, no statements, no damage control. For a man who always had something to say about everything, the silence was deafening. But silence never lasts forever.